You are holy, holy. Are you Lord God Almighty? Sing worthy, worthy. Sing holy, holy is the Lamb. Holy, holy is the Lamb. He's righteous, righteous. Jesus, Jesus. Sing amen, amen.
Thank you for the blood you gave for me.
Absolutely.
Your Savior sacrificed
All right.
upon
We're going to begin. So, in spite of the snow, glad you could make it this morning. Who knew it would be like this morning? But Andy's with us this morning, all morning, 9:30, and again at 10:30. So hopefully people are coming for 10:30. Andy and myself, and really Carol, we've known each other for a while. Carol and Andy grew up together. They went to grade school together, high school together, college. You overlapped. Yeah, you said it took you a while. You were a late bloomer. So you really was to college.
I am a late bloomer.
And he then went on and he can tell you kind of his schooling background and all that good stuff. But I've just enjoyed seeing Andy and how God has used him over the years, both in pastoral ministry and now still in ministry, even though your mom would want you to be back in pastoral ministry. He told us that yesterday. So, Andy, thanks for being here. He's going to share again now and then again at 10:30, a couple different things. But we were encouraged yesterday at our men's time, and you'll be encouraged now. So, Andy.
All right, good morning. So what I'd like to do, what I really like to do is make you move, but I won't do that because I want to be invited back, and I don't want you to, if I do anything today to make you hate me, that would be it. So what I'm going to do in the time that we have is I just want to explain our ministry to you a little bit. Is that okay? Because I am a missionary to college students, but in a very unique way that I may have explained this to you when I was here 6 years ago, but none of us can remember almost when that was or what I talked about, so I guess it's not all that memorable. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what we do, some dreams and goals and plans that we have for our ministry. I'm going to tell you ways specifically that you can help if you're interested in that, and if by some Christmas miracle we have time left over, we'll do a Q&A. When we're done. Does that sound good? All right. So, as Scott said, Carol and I have known each other since we were 5 years old. She's significantly younger than me. We remembered today by like 11 months or something. So, we grew up in the same Christian school. I grew up in a Christian home. My story is that I was adopted at 3 weeks of age. And as the story goes, that first Sunday I was home, my parents had me in the church that owned the school that I went to, and I was in that church for 18 years of my life. And I'm quite certain that first Sunday was not so much an act of piety on the part of my parents, other than they were showing off their new kid. You know what I mean? So it was kind of like Lion King style. So here he is. So I grew up in that environment. I was put up for adoption through Christian Adoption Agency. This is God's providence. I haven't the foggiest idea who my biological family is. I've never met them. And if you want to ask me, have you ever thought about meeting them? Yep, but that's not going to happen until my mom and dad are taken home because, frankly, I just don't need the extra headache. So I can wait on that. Being raised in this Christian home, I became a Christian at about 5 years of age. And I'm thankful for that. I do not have a wild testimony to tell you about getting saved out of some addictions or something like that. I'm thankful, very thankful, that I was raised in an environment where I didn't even know what some of those things were. And I'm glad for that. I was raised in what you would call a strict, conservative, fundamentalist environment. And usually when someone's telling a story like this is where it goes off the rails. And they will tell you, well, and I felt so oppressed, and it wasn't until later in life that I actually begin to see what abject nonsense. The people that my parents, my youth pastors, who was also my Bible teacher, I couldn't get away from them, my teachers, the parents of my friends, everybody around me had my best interest at heart. They're godly people. And it's just different way of doing things. All right, so it's a strict fundamentalist environment, fine. They weren't angry, they weren't mad, they weren't, protesting all the time and all that. But it was pretty strict. So along with those strictures does come a bit of baggage. Right? There are some things that you get told you can and cannot do. Like, for instance, I had to hide certain types of music. And I had to, so in one place, I had cassette tapes. Anybody remember cassette tapes? Okay, you were recognized. Yes, all right, Gen Xers, I'm at home. So I had to hide my cassette tapes. So my Van Halen, Bon Jovi, and Petra were all in the same place. And I would have gotten in trouble equally for all of them, which is silly and ironic, but it's also very true. We weren't allowed to go on any youth group trips and use a Walkman or have headphones because those are the playthings of the devil. We couldn't do that. And now, we have AirPods that some of them you can't even tell they're in kids' ears anymore, and like, what are you listening to? So, stuff like that. Or I remember in our Christian school, 6th grade, the high school that year, the school play was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It was scandalous. Anybody want to take a guess why? Because there's a witch. Yep, it was scandalous because there's a witch. Later on, when we were in about 10th grade, we did a play called Lumberjacks and Wedding Bells. It involved zero acting for any of the boys that were in that show because all we had to do is just be ourselves, and that meant be idiots. It was a farce kind of built on 7 Brides for 7 Brothers kind of thing. But there's a big scandal with that because the final scene was the big hoedown, like barn dance scene. And so there were parents that were concerned about premarital arm locking. So we had to change lyrics and songs, and I'm not making this up. I am not making this up, right? So every Christian culture has its own unwritten things that they do. So we can laugh at that, but 50 years from now, somebody from here is going to be telling a story, about things that we just may seem weird, but in the end, does it really matter? No. It was kind of silly, and I'm sure I was really upset about it unnecessarily back then, but does it really matter? But then there were some other things. We were in a Christian school, and I once figured out, I remember I was a junior or senior, I can't remember exactly what year that was, but I wanted to try to calculate the number of hours I had spent in biblical education. So I included family devotions, daily Bible classes, weekly chapel, Sunday school, church, youth group, going to camp, going to retreats. And I remember the number that I came up with was astronomical. It was huge. And so we were immersed in the Bible. This is a good thing. My youth pastor also happened to be my Bible teacher because, like I told you, we went to the church that operated and owned the school. And, we're talking about Bible stuff. And I was raised in a home that if I got in trouble at school, I got in a lot more trouble at home because, my parents actually thought a 40-something-year-old teacher had more insight than me. Imagine that. So it didn't pay for me to get in trouble at school. Now I'm so dumb that I did it anyway. But I also learned the power of plausible deniability because we did have members of our class. I'm like one lab accident away from being a supervillain, so I could come up with a plan and I could talk somebody into doing it, and then they would do it, and I would say I didn't do it. And I could just sit back and enjoy myself. That was especially true of how I engaged with teachers. So in a Bible class, I would never raise my hand and ask a challenging question. But I thought them. And I wasn't trying to be an idiot, but I was so afraid of the consequences that I let things go. Because we were sometimes talking about primary things, right? There are fundamental primary issues that you must believe in order to be a Christian, right? Like, you could name them very easily, starting off with things like, well, I have to believe that God exists first. Yes, that's necessary, right? And then there are specific things about who Jesus is and what he did. So we'd be talking about those things, and in my mind I would think, yeah, but how do we know that? How do I know that that's true? Now, the simple answer is because the Bible says so. And that's an appropriate answer. I hold that the Bible's authoritative and historically accurate, right? So that's appropriate. But that doesn't answer the question yet. And then sometimes we'd be talking about secondary things, like music. And we're Gen Xers, so we fought about music. I remember sitting there in class, and I had classmates bringing copies of Bon Jovi's Living on a Prayer to my youth pastor and trying to convince him this is Christian music. And I thought, you're either that stupid or you think he's that stupid. I mean, just hide it with your Petra and Whiteheart and be done with it. I mean, honestly, just make it easy on yourself. This is dumb. So I would think those things, but I had other students in my class who were not under the same strictures that I was under, and they would ask questions. They would raise their hand, and I'm not certain that these students were asking from a pure heart. I don't know that for certain. I have certain outside evidence that would tell me I think I'm right, but I don't know. And they would raise their hand and say, yeah, but how do we know X is true? Whether X be a fundamental about, say, Christianity, life and godliness, or a secondary or even tertiary issue. Like, should men have facial hair? Am I allowed to go to movies? All the really important things that Baptists debated in the 1980s. So, stuff like that. And so after a little bit of time, the answer would come back from my youth pastor, well, yeah, we know these things are true because the Bible tells us. Okay. Then the follow-up question from a student would be, well, how do you know that you can trust the Bible? Well, because God assures us that we can trust the Bible. And how do you know that God assures us that you can trust the Bible? Because it's written in this is called circular reasoning, or begging the question. It's a logical fallacy. Now, if you were to ask me, Andy, do you believe the Bible is historic and authoritative? Yes. Do you believe that God has assured us that we can trust it? Yes. But I have a list of things under those that support that idea. Now, if someone doesn't know any of that stuff and they just believe that the Bible's authoritative and they do what it says, is that good? Yes. Okay, so don't misunderstand what I'm saying to you. But I thought, okay, yeah, I get that. And this is kind of how I rolled through high school. I did go to college a little bit later. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to be. So I went to college a little bit later, and now I'm in Bible college, and we're talking about the same things, and the same questions come up. But oddly, at Bible college, the kids that are asking them are really trying to pick a fight with the professor. I to this day, cannot understand that. I have never had that. I've had 1,000 students come through my classroom. I've never had a student try to pick a fight with me. I don't know. So they would ask the same questions, but I learned a new piece. I learned a new piece in Bible college, because it would be like, well, the Bible says so, duh. You're in Bible college. Yes, God assures us, I mean, you've had Theology 101. And if those didn't work, then the ultimate trump card, the ace up the sleeve that the professor would pull out would be this. It is called the argument of authority from power. And they would say to the student, well, you should have known what you're getting into. You had to sign the doctrinal statement in order to go to school here. So your choices are lead, follow, or get out of the way. This is what we're going to do. Boom. And I think, yeah, take that, you snotty freshman. That's what I thought. So filed that one away. I graduated. It took me much longer than it should have to graduate from college. I was married for most of the time that I was a student, worked full time, tried to go to school full time. I became a youth pastor, served as a youth pastor for a couple years. And then I was working for the school, traveling. I went to seminary. I got my seminary degree, so I have Bible college, seminary, Bible, theology. I am the ministry equivalent of Fat, Dumb, and Happy. I'm traveling the country, and I'm speaking at camps. I'm supposed to be recruiting kids to come to BBC, and I guess that worked sometimes, but I just had fun going and speaking at camps, and I'm in my 30s, so I got paid to go to camp all summer long, and I was young enough to enjoy it. Do you have any idea how much paintball I've played? And I've never paid a red cent for a paintball. And I'm good at it because I'm so nerdy, I read infantry tactic books. They work. So I'm at some camp, and I find some kid that's a senior, and he just finished 8 weeks of basic training with the National Guard. I'm like, you want to be my battle buddy? He's like, uh-huh. We'd lit kids up playing paintball. So I'm speaking all over the country, and I thought, okay, this is great. I'm enjoying this. And then in the summer of 2008, a weird thing happened. I had an epiphany, which was pretty spectacular for a knuckle-dragging youth ministry guy like me. The epiphany was, you know what? Maybe I ought to take a book with me when I travel for the summer, because I would be gone anywhere from 8 to 11 weeks of speaking just in summer camp, let alone the rest of the year. So I thought maybe I ought to take a book with me, because back then I didn't have a phone I could throw at the internet, and most camps didn't have Wi-Fi anyway, so I was by myself, had a lot of downtime, so I thought, well, I are educated, I can read a book, so I'm going to go get me one, darn it. So I go down to the library, and I'm checking out the new book section. I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you're browsing in Barnes & Noble or Books A Million or a library or whatever, but a book almost jumps off the shelf into your hands. That happened to me. It was weird, and I can't really tell you it's happened all that many other times, but the name of the book was called Tree of Tales. And I flipped it over, and I realized very quickly that it was a collection of essays written by the faculty of the Divinity School at St. Andrews University in Scotland, which is like the oldest university in all of Europe. All right, it's almost 1,000 years old, right? So this thing is ancient. And it was a series of essays written to commemorate the 65th anniversary of when J.R.R. Tolkien delivered his essay on fairy story at the Divinity School in the 1930s. And so the back cover went on to say, yes, we're going to explore Tolkien's Christian worldview and how it has survived in the blockbuster films. The monstrosities known as the Hobbit movies hadn't come out yet, so these are just the Lord of the Rings films. And, of course, is in his Christian worldviews found in his writing. Now, I was thinking, okay, I'm not the only lunatic on the planet, because I'd seen the Lord of the Rings movies. I'd never read a sentence Tolkien had written at this point. I had seen the movies, and I thought, am I seeing Christian themes in these films? Now, I lived in and worked at a place where I had really nobody I could talk to about that. Because if I went and asked, do you think there's Christian themes in these movies? The answer would have been, well, no, of course not, and why are you going to movies in the first place? So I didn't really have a resource for that, but I thought, these knuckleheads seem to think there is one. So I flipped through it, and the margins are nice and wide. There's only like 170 pages, and the words aren't really close together. Perfect book for a youth guy, right? So I check it out, and I'm like, look at me, I have a book. So I take the book, and I hit the road, and I dive into this thing, and I'm hooked hard, big time. Because the first thing I read is this essay, which you can find online. It's 15 typed pages, double-spaced. This essay on fairy story, which is Tolkien's philosophy of story, what it's supposed to be, what it's supposed to do. And he said that this idea that fiction, particularly what we would call fantasy, is about like little people like riding around bumblebees and they're using like stingers as swords. That's stupid. That's not what it is at all. And he talked about how a really good story isn't an escape from something. So if you go to a bookstore now and you look in their fantasy section, which you will find Lewis and Tolkien, unfortunately, because they wouldn't want to be there, they're not like all the other books. All the other books, they're helping you escape from reality. Tolkien said, I want to write things that's going to bring you closer to the way things are supposed to be. And he coined a term for what made a really good story. He called it a eucatastrophe. It's a mashup of two Greek words, euangelion, which is good news, and catastrophe. You know what that is. A good catastrophe. So it's a story that starts off pretty well, falls apart near the beginning, and then there's a long, slow climb that seems like everything's going to be okay, and just when you get to that moment, all hope is lost. And then in the 11th hour, at its darkest, hope rises again. And as he's explaining that, I'm like, that sounds like the Bible. And at the end of the essay, he said, by the way, the greatest eucatastrophe the humans have ever heard is a story of the gospel. What? I was unprepared for that. Whoa. I didn't know. So I thought, where has this been all my life? So I'm reading. And then I get to a camp in central New Hampshire, in the southern edge of the White Mountains, and that year New Hampshire was getting its annual rainfall in about 3 days. It was all coming down. Those of you who've spent time at camp, you know a little bit of rain makes camp interesting. A lot of rain makes camp miserable. This is the category that we're in. I'm so thankful. All I had to do was show up and explain the Bible to 200 hormonal teenagers. I didn't have to figure out what to do with them the other 23 hours of the day. I'm not the program staff. Have fun, guys. So I spent a lot of time in my leaky cabin reading this book, and I got to the chapter that dealt with the friendship of Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. Now, I knew they knew each other. I knew they were both Oxford Dons. I knew they both survived the trenches of World War I, barely, in France. Tolkien being sent home with trench fever. C.S. Lewis being sent home, nearly being obliterated by an artillery shell. It completely blew up the guy standing next to him. Just gone, vaporized him. And Lewis, carried shrapnel in his body for the rest of his life. I knew that. I knew Tolkien is considered the greatest fiction writer of the 20th century. I know Lewis is considered the greatest Christian writer of the 20th century. What I did not know prior to reading that book is that when they first met, C.S. Lewis was an atheist. No idea. Wait. The guy that wrote Mere Christianity? The guy that wrote the Chronicles of Narnia? An atheist? I didn't know this. I had no idea. So I read how Tolkien, being a super nerd, was always putting together groups, like literary groups. He did so with his friends in grade school, most of them killed in World War I, and did so in his own years as a university student and then as a professor. He did that. So he put together this group called the Coal Biters, which comes... he's English. I mean, it comes from the idea of the Welsh winters being so cold that the people there, they gather around their coal stoves close enough they can bite the coal. Who thinks of this stuff? But I'm just telling you what it was called. The Coal Bitters, it was called. And they met in C.S. Lewis's rooms at Magdalen College in Oxford on Thursday nights. And what they would do is they would get together. Now, write this down for your next outing because you're going to want to try this. They would get together and they would talk about Old Norse Viking hero myth, and they would read it in Old Finnish because Tolkien was an expert in languages. In fact, you can read many places that Tolkien made up his own jokes in ancient language, and I really want to hear one of those because, what would it be like? A druid, a shield maiden, and a monk walk into a bar. Don't you want to know the punchline to that? I do. I haven't come up with it yet. So they would talk about these hero myths. And then they would talk about like some of the myths of say, northern Germany, the old horse lords of Germany. Or they would talk about things like Beowulf. Or they would even discuss Greek and Roman hero myths. And one Thursday night, 91 years ago, this past September, after the cigar and pipe smoke got too much for them, C.S. Lewis and Tolkien went out and they traveled around a wooded pathway that surrounds Magdalen College called Addison's Walk. And it was there that C.S. Lewis said to Tolkien, Towers, I love these stories, but I'm ultimately dissatisfied because they're not true. They're just lies. All these hero stories are just lies. Although they are lies that are breathed through silver so that they have the ring of truth, I am moved, but I'm dissatisfied because they don't mean anything. They're just not true. Tolkien said, Jack, this is where you are wrong. They are not just lies. They serve a purpose. All the ancient hero stories point forward. And all the recent Beowulf hero stories point back to the one place where the hero story became fact in space and time. And C.S. Lewis said, oh, come on. You're not going to talk about the dying and resurrecting carpenter again, are you? And Tolkien said, I am. Because that is the one hero story you will not listen to, and it is the only one that will radically change your life and completely alter your destiny. You bow the knee, Jack, to all the other stories except the one that has power. So I read how Tolkien patiently, lovingly, creatively, and intellectually explained the gospel to his friend. And C.S. Lewis said it was that night he moved from atheist to theist. That night. And then 2 weeks later, while riding in the sidecar of his brother's motorcycle on the way back from the zoo on a Sunday morning, he said it all became clear. And he realized Jesus is God and asked him to save him. I am not emotional usually when I read books unless it involves dogs. Marley and me nearly institutionalized me. I will read dog books, but I'm like, okay, I'm ready. So I don't normally cry, but I'm sobbing in my leaky room because the Holy Spirit just kicked me upside the head and said, Andy, what would you do if I brought a thinking atheist into your life? You're down at the bougie coffee shop with your little moleskin notebook and your little cool guy Bible and your $12 or whatever thing you're drinking, kombucha, whatever the heck that's supposed to be. It looks like angry cottage cheese juice to me, but whatever. And I'm sitting there. It's like the thing that would fling over a wall during a medieval, siege. Fling it now, Jean-Claude. Bing. Sorry. So, and I'm sitting there having my devos because I want to be a good witness. Well, what if some militant atheist comes and picks a fight with me? Your Bible's false, your God is dead, and you're a moron. What would your response be, Andy? I'll tell you what it would be at that moment. My blood pressure would have gone up several isobars. I would have got the quiver lip. I would have got a lump in my throat, and I would have responded with a good, hearty, nuh-uh, because that's all that I had. That is all that I had. And I suddenly realized I couldn't do that. I have degrees in Bible and theology, and I can't do that. In fact, I'm not sure I know why I believe what I believe. I need help. So I got back, and I went to the one person who could help me, who happened to be Carol's uncle. He was like my Morpheus in seminary. If you know, you know. And he was like my Morpheus, and he's like, okay, Andy, it's time, red pill or blue pill. And he was kind of laughing at me because he said, I knew this was going to happen. I've been waiting for this to happen. Well, thanks, Jim. You could have helped me out. I mean, you were my Awana leader, for Pete's sake, 100 years ago. So that's when I went back to school to study philosophy, and I started realizing, oh, there are really, really good reasons to believe what I believe. And look at these guys that I were told back in my Christian school days from the ancient Greece world. I was told they're a bunch of sex-crazed drunks who can't teach us anything. That's actually not true. They're asking really important questions. And you know what? Sometimes they're right. There's a hill called truth, and at its summit is Jesus Christ and Him crucified. But there are some who've gotten partway up, and we would be wise to pay attention to the things that they have discovered. So, anyway, this new thing happened. I went back to school to study philosophy and started figuring this stuff out. I got an opportunity to teach as an adjunct in one of our local colleges, and suddenly realized, okay, there are no Christian organizations on any campus of the 5 colleges within the city limits of Scranton. So I start complaining to God, you got to do something. It's an unreached people group. There's 10,000 kids here. Do something. You know where this is going to go, right? So God says, hey, dummy, why don't you do something? You live 4 blocks from the University of Scranton. You have 20 years of youth ministry experience. You have degrees in Bible, theology, and philosophy. Duh. Right. So we launched Addison's Walk 8 years ago. As an opportunity to have gospel ministry in the lives of college students. We are not a club, so I have no right to be on campus by virtue of the organization. I have a right to be on campus because I have a little piece of plastic in my wallet that says faculty on it. So I'm an adjunct philosophy professor at the University of Scranton. I've been there several years. I teach at least 2 classes a year. And let me emphasize, I am an adjunct professor. So if you're wondering, well, you're a missionary and you probably want our support, but you're a professor, do you get paid? Technically, yes. And I get paid enough that if I want to, I could eat lunch in the cafeteria every day. That's how much I get paid per class. It's the last great injustice of the Catholic institution, what they pay adjuncts. So you cannot make a living on an adjunct salary. So we are missionary supported, and we are unique as missionaries. We are not church planters, but we're breaking up ground. And what I'm doing, and because we are talking about fundamental issues in the classroom, and my students know exactly who and what I am. I tell them on the first day, I am a Christian, and I tell them what that means. I also tell them I pastored a Baptist church here in the inner city for 10 years. That's for shock value. The looks on their faces are like, oh no. They know exactly who I am, and we come right up to the edge in class, and the students come to me and they want to spend time with me. And no, it's not the kids who would just identify as Christian. I could tell you about, if this is being recorded, it is not going to be publicly accessible, right? It's on YouTube right now? It's live streaming? Okay, then I can't tell you. I have students that want to come see me. They want to come talk to me. From backgrounds that may shock you, because they want answers. And when I say backgrounds that'll shock you, if you're thinking, do you mean lifestyle choices? Mm-hmm. Andy, do you mean people who come from backgrounds of religions that are way outside of Christianity? Yes. Yeah. So my main ministry is there in the classroom. My secondary ministry is visiting folk like you and helping you understand, yeah, you have a good reason to believe what you believe. Be confident. It's good. So let me tell you about just a couple things that we're dreaming about as a ministry, and then we have a few minutes for Q&A. Okay. So a couple things. We're developing some classes that we're going to be packaging in video form. I have a couple different churches that are working with us. Chris Brown has invited me to come to Wisconsin and film all of them and edit all of them, so that's a bonus. So there are things along the lines of like basically intro to philosophy. We call that one Dare to Think, an introduction to Christian worldview. And these are all 16-week classes. We have another one on existentialism called Heroes of the Rebellion. If you saw the little poster out there, that one's kind of my favorite because it's got the Star Wars theme to it. If you know, you know. And then we're doing a third one called Shield of the Gods, Introduction to Epic Literature, where we will be reading the Iliad, the Aeneid, and Beowulf in that order. And these are all 16-week classes, and primarily, they can be used for like homeschooling application. There's all different boxes you can check off for that, but we also want to get it into people's hands because we want to just teach you good literature. Any of that stuff, like let's say as a church, South Baptist, you have like 10, 15 kids or whatever that want to do a class like that, I would come here and we can do it in a week. We can do it in a week. And you also can take those classes because they have syllabi, there's real work. I mean, these are real classes. They're equivalent to a 3-credit class. And then you can take them to places like Clark Summit University, and they will accept that as credit. I'm sure CSU will because they've told me. Other schools probably will, but there's a whole discussion. We could talk about accreditation. Just because you have an actual accredited class, no one has to take it anyway. That's not what it means to get a thing transferred. It's the syllabus, and is the person teaching it qualified, and did you actually do work? So I'm just saying. And if you do one of those classes with us, it'll be way less than you pay for any 3-credit class. Our classes are going to be around the $400 mark. Just to give you an idea, online at CSU, classes start at $400 a credit hour. So, and that's online. On campus, astronomical. Okay? So, just that. The other thing that we are dreaming of is we want to create a gap year program. It's called the Rivendell Fellows Academy. So what I want to do is I want to purchase 2 large multifamily Victorian homes in Scranton, about a block apart, men's, women's. We have a curriculum ready to go. It is a 36 credit hour, 2-semester program that is the best of the best, pulling from history, literature, philosophy, apologetics. We are not doing any specific Bible or theology classes, and don't be upset by that. That is by design, because all the other stuff we're doing is deeply immersed in Scripture. Imagine a student of yours picking up a book that has had massive influence in Western civilization for nearly 3,000 years, like Plato's Republic. And they're reading Plato talking about this dude escaping from a cave, and the dude doesn't escape from the cave by himself. He is rescued by someone that Plato never tells you who it is. I know who it is. But brings this guy to the light, and he sees and he realizes there are still people in the darkness that need the light. And he goes back in, and guess what happens? They don't listen to them. I've read that before. Where have I heard that? Oh, John, who's, by the way, writing to a Greek audience. And what themes does John use all the time? Light, dark. So your student would have, say, Plato open in one hand, their Bible in the other. And basically what I'm saying to you is you send us your sons and daughters, and in the name of Jesus, I intend to corrupt the youth. We will ruin them. We will send them back to you unharmed, but I guarantee they will not come back to you unscathed. I'm serious. I'm dead serious. And I would only be teaching a few of these classes. I actually know, because of my education background and the circles that I run in, I know the best of the best to teach these classes, and they are asking me if they can come teach. It's going to be all adjuncts for teaching, so we can keep the costs low. But if you'd be praying about that with us, we need about $1.5 million for that to happen. With $1.5 million, I can buy 2 gorgeous houses, turnkey, in Scranton, ready to go, and we'd have about $600,000 left over so that we can just start now. And we don't have to worry about, surviving on the backs of tuition. We need to hire a men's residential director, a women's residential director. You will never be called a dorm mom or dad. Those words will never come out of my mouth. Your title will probably be director of spiritual formation. And we need to hire an academic dean because I just don't want to do that stuff. And the only other person we need to hire is actually a maintenance person. And that maintenance person is also just as much involved in the development of the whole person as anyone else. Everybody we hire will have the mind of a scholar, the heart of a pastor, the hands of a servant. So our students they're going to learn to cook. They're not going to eat ramen every day. We're going to teach them how to fix stuff. We probably won't put them on a 30-foot ladder. That'd be a bad idea. But we're going to actually, it's kind of, if you're familiar with Francis Schaeffer's L'Abri, it's going to be kind of like that. They're going to have stuff to do, not cheap labor, but we're going to teach them how to live. And along with that, we're going to teach them how to think so that they can go to school anywhere and actually make an impact for the cause of Christ. So, if you want to write a check for $1.5 million, I would be shocked, but I would find a way to make sure that gets into our account very quickly. So we are praying about that. I'll be honest with you, I'd love to partner with you as a church. I'd love to be one of your missionaries. We've been running at a minimum since we started, and God has been taking care of us, has kept us afloat, but a little bit of padding would not be a terrible thing. So what questions, comments, or snide remarks do you have? And Scott, you can tell me to quit whenever you need me to. Yes? We have done no fundraising for this yet. We're kind of at that point where I need to hire like an executive officer, but I have nothing to do that because this is a project that's a full-time job in and of itself, right? I'm not quite sure how to do that, because once I do that, then I will have the resources, I can hire the people, but I can't do that. So we were actually going to partner with Clark Summit University for this 3 years ago. They were going to host it for us, and then COVID hit, and so that all went away, and that's okay. So we're back to square one. So we're not quite there yet. Yes. Can you tell us about your family? I can. I'm sorry. So my wife Becky and I will be celebrating our 30th anniversary in June. Can't believe I'm that old, but we're celebrating our 30th anniversary in June. We have 2 children. Sean is 14, and he's this tall. He went from a little boy to whatever he is overnight. I'm not quite sure. His voice dropped in 24 hours, and I mean, boom. It scares me. And then his sister is just a year and 2 days younger than him, Olivia. She's 13. They came to us through foster care. And so we adopted them 6 years ago, and now apparently you can't give them back after you adopt them. We didn't read the fine print. So they go to a little classical Christian school in Scranton, and they're really thriving. My wife is recovering from knee surgery. She just had a knee replacement a month ago, so she's doing pretty good with that. Yeah. So that's, just us. Yes?
Back to the beginning of your talk, you were talking about, you came to the circular reasoning.
Uh-huh.
What would your answer be to that? What would your answer be to the, kid asked that question?
Well, I'd have to say, well, specifically, what are we talking about here? Right? So the thing is, we have to arrive at a conclusion. Is the Bible accurate in its facts, like historically? So there's a lot of different ways we can do that. First way would be with deductive reasoning that actually the Bible gives me permission to do. In Psalm 19, telling me the heavens declare the glory of God, or Romans 1, where Paul is saying that man's without excuse because we can know things about God's divine nature just by looking outside. So there are a couple arguments just for God's existence that I can make with my Bible tied behind my back, and the Bible gives me permission to do that. Paul gives us a master's class in how that works in Acts 17 when he's in Athens. So there's stuff like that. All right, okay, but what about these eyewitness accounts of Jesus and things like that? Well, I would start talking about the manuscript evidence, how just in Greek manuscripts for the New Testament alone blows away all other ancient texts combined. It's massive. And then, so to actually understand, these pass all the tests of history, number one. Number two, so then you would say, well, maybe the disciples are lying. Well, if they're lying, they're the worst liars on the planet, because you tell lies that benefit you, not ones that are going to get you crucified as well, right? So, I try to condense that really down, but it'd be stuff like that. Does that satisfy your question? Okay. Yep. Okay. We're done. All right. So I was very unceremonious. I'm happy to carry the conversation with you. Again, thank you for letting me be here with you today. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Over the mountains and the sea.